Welcome back to another episode of the Four Archetypes. I'm Dr. Lahab Al-Samarrai, and with me today, as always, Dr. Eric Tomlinson is here with us, and Dr. Lisa Hong is here with us. And today, we return to the Arabian Nights, and we are now at the story of the Prince and the Ghoul. Okay, so the tale of the king's son and the ghoul. So in this story, we're gonna explore more of Shahrazad's wisdom as we continue our trek through um, the Arabian Nights, the annotated uh, Arabian Nights. Okay, without further ado, um, Dr. Eric is gonna start reading for us. Dr. Eric, take us
Yes,
away.
sir. All righty then. They say there was a king who had a son much given to hunting and trapping, and whose father had charged a vizier to follow him wherever he went. One day the prince set out for the chase with his men, and in the wilderness they saw a beast. The vizier said, "Follow it." And the prince pursued the creature until he lost his way and found himself alone. Not knowing where to turn, when a woman appeared ahead weeping, the boy said, "Where are you from?" "I am the daughter," said the woman, "of one of the kings of India, and I was riding in the wilderness when sleep came over me and threw me from my horse. Now here I am alone and lost." The prince took pity on her and let her ride beside or behind him on his horse. As they passed a ruin, she said, "Nature calls." He let her down into the ruin, and soon he went in after her, not knowing where she was or what she was, and found she was a ghoul. And she was saying to her children, "I have brought you a nice fat boy." "Mother," they were saying, "bring him to us. Let us eat his belly." At these words, the prince turned back, fearing for his life. But the ghoul followed him out and said, "What do you fear? I am a persecuted man." "If you are persecuted," she said, "God will free you." The king's son raised his eyes to heaven and said, "Lord, protect me from my enemy, for everything is in your power." When the ghoul heard his prayer, she let him go, and he went back to his father and told him how the vizier had sent him on the trail of that wild beast and into the ghoul's arms. And the king called the vizier and had him killed. "And you, Majesty," said the envious vizier, "if you put your trust in this wise man, he will destroy you. He is a foreign agent come to bring you down. Do you not see that he cured you from a distance simply by giving you something to hold?" "You are right," said the king. "It must be as you say. He has come to destroy me. If he has cured me with something to hold, he may well kill me with something to smell. What should I do with him?" "Send him for now," said the vizier, "and when he comes, strike off his head, and you shall have your safety." The king said, "This is good advice." He sent for Duban, who arrived still full of joy at all the honor, gifts, and favors that were his. He motioned to the king and said these lines: "If I have failed to give the thanks I owe, for whom then do I make my verse and prose? There fell into my lap, before I knew to ask, an avalanche of gifts from you. How could I not commend you to the crowd and sing my private awe for you out loud, in thanks for all the gifts that bend my shoulder, even as they turn my care to feathers?" The king said, "Do you know why I brought you here?" The wise Duban said, "No, I brought you here to take away your life." Duban was astonished and said, "Kill me, Majesty? And for what crime?" "I've been told," said the king, "you are a spy come to kill me, but I will kill you first. You want me for your dinner, but I'll have you for lunch. He called the executioner and said, "Strike off this wise man's head and rid me of his harm. Strike." At these words, the wise man understood he had been envied for his favor with the king, and that somebody had lied to have him killed. He knew the king had little sense or wisdom, and he regretted what was too late to regret. "There is no power and no strength except in God," he said. "I did a good thing and was paid with spite." And the king was shouting, "Strike!" "Spare me," the wise man said, "and God will spare you. But kill me and be killed." He said it again, "Just as I did to you, Jinn, but you would not turn your mind from murder." Then King Yunnan said to the wise Duban, "I have to kill you, for you cured me with a thing I only had to hold, and I fear you could kill me with anything." "Is this my reward?" the wise man said. "Cruelty for care?" And the king said, "You must die today." When the wise man knew his death was near, he wept and blamed himself for doing good to people who were not, and for sowing seeds in barren soil. He said these lines: "Maimuna has an empty head, though born to a wise father. And if they call you brother, keep your wits, and if you walk the earth, prepare to slip." Then the executioner came near, bound the wise man's weeping eyes, and drew his sword. But the wise man said again, "Spare me, and God will spare you. But kill me and be killed." And he recited, "Decent I did not thrive, they deceitful did. Sincerity has led me to a house of sin. If I live, nevermore will I speak of my mind. If I die, damn them all, those who give advice." The wise man added, "Is this my reward? It is like the reward of the crocodile." "What," said the king, "is the story of the crocodile?" "I'm in no condition to tell you a story," said the wise man, "but I beg you, spare me and God will spare you, but kill me and be killed." And he wept heavy tears. Then a few of the king's noblemen stood up and said, "Majesty, spare him for our sake. He has done nothing wrong." "You do not know," said the king, "why I must kill him. If I were to spare him, I would die myself, for he has cured me from a distance of an illness that defied the doctors, and he did so with a thing I only had to hold. I cannot be sure he will not kill me with the same device. I must kill him to be safe." Again the wise man said, "Spare me and God will spare you, but kill me and be killed." "I have to kill you," said the king. And Jinn, when the wise Duban was sure his end had come, he said, "Majesty, delay my death a little. Allow me time to return home. Leave instructions for my burial, fulfill my obligations and give alms, and donate my books on medicine and science to a deserving home. In particular, I have a book, rarest of the rare, I want to give to you to keep among your treasures." "What makes the book so rare?" asked the king. "Its wonders are not to be counted," said Duban. "But the first of his secrets is this: if you, Majesty, cut off my head and open the book at the 6th page and read 3 lines from the left page and speak to me, my head will speak to you and answer what you ask." King was amazed. "Do you mean," he said, "that if I cut off your head, open the book and read the lines you say and speak to your head, it'll speak to me? Nothing could be stranger." He sent the wise man home with guards to settle his affairs, and on the following day he went back to the court, and so too did the princes and viziers, officials, and nobles. Then the wise Duban arrived, and in his hands were an old book and a coal jar containing powder. He sat down, sent for a tray, poured out the powder, spread it, and said to the king, "Take this book, Majesty, and do not open it until I die, and have my head placed on the tray and pressed into the powder. This will stanch the blood." Open the book, address your questions to my head, and it will answer back. There is no power and no strength except in God. And remember, spare me and God will spare you, but kill me and be killed. I have to kill you, said the king, if only to see your head speak. He took the book and told the executioner to cut off the wise man's head. He drew the sword and with a single stroke dropped the head into the tray and pressed it into the powder, and the bleeding stopped. Then the wise Duban opened his eyes and said, "Now, Majesty, open the book." And when the king opened the book, he found pages stuck. He put his finger to his mouth and wet it with saliva and turned to the first page. In the same effortful way, he turned page after page. And when he had turned 7 and found nothing written, he said, "Duban, I cannot see a written word inside this book." "Keep turning," said Duban. The king turned more pages and found nothing. But as he licked and turned, the drug entered his body. The book was laced with poison. And he began to sway and heave and shake. And when the wise Duban saw that the king began to sway and shake, he said these lines: "Their reign was long and cruel, and in a moment gone, had justice been their rule, justice would be done. But they, brutal in power, have met a brutal end, and wait to hear the hour crowing its revenge." As the wise man's head finished these lines, the king fell dead, then the head died too. The fisherman said to the jinn, "Consider this story. Had the king spared the wise man, God would have spared him. But the king refused and killed him, and God killed him in turn. Had you, jinn, agreed to spare me, I would have spared you. But you desired my death, and I shall quicken yours by sending you inside this bottle to the bottom of the sea." But the jinn cried, "Fisherman, don't do it. Spare me and forgive me what I did. If I was bad, you should be better. Do not do what Imama did to Atika." "What did Imama do to Atika?" "There is no time for stories. I'm in a cage. But if you set me free, I will relate it." "Into the sea you must go," said the fisherman. "There is no escape for you. For my imploring did not move you, though I have never wronged you, but only set you free. When you treated me this way, I knew that you were wicked to the bone, malicious, and that you repay good with harm. When I throw you to the waves, I'll build a hut here and live there just for you, to warn all those who fish you out against you, and tell them what you did, and have them cast you back into the sea and let you languish there until the end of time. Set me free this time," said the jinn, "and I pledge that I will never trouble you or do you harm, but I will make you rich." The fisherman agreed, secured the pledge with oaths and vows, and made the jinn swear on the name of the Almighty he would only do him good. Then he opened the jar. The smoke seeped out, rose clear of the mouth, and resolved into a jinn, who kicked the jar away into the sea. At this sight, the fisherman was terrified and wet himself, and said, "No good can come of this." And he was sure of death. Then he fortified his heart and said, "You promised, jinn, and pledged that you would not betray me. Come, or God will punish you in turn. And remember what Duban said to the king: spare me, and God will spare you. But kill me and be killed." But the jinn laughed at the words. The fisherman said, "Spare me." "Follow me," the jinn replied. The fisherman, hardly believing his escape, followed him out of the city, reached a mountain, climbed it to the other side, and came to a vast plain. In its center was a lake surrounded by 4 hills. Here the jinn stopped and told the fisherman to cast his net and fish. In the water were fish of many colors, white and red and blue and yellow. He cast his net and drew it in and found 4 fish inside, blue and yellow, red and white. He marveled and was glad. Take them to the sultan of your city, said the jinn. He will give you enough to make you rich. Forgive me, I know no other way to make you rich. But do not fish here more than once a day. I will miss you, said the jinn at last, and kicked the earth, which opened to admit him, while the fisherman went to the city, full of wonder at the jinn and at the fish of many colors. When he entered the king's palace, he presented the fish to him.
The king looked at the fish of many colors, took one in his hands, and was amazed. He told his vizier to take them to the cook he had been given by the emperor of Byzantium. The vizier went to the cook and said, "Tears are for crying, as they say. The king was given these 4 fish, and he wants you to fry them." Then he went back to the king, who told the vizier to give the fisherman 400 dirhams. And the fisherman received the coins and held them in his clothes, and off he ran. As he ran, he stumbled, fell, and stood again, thinking he was in a dream, and for his family he bought all they would need. As for the cook, she scaled and cleaned the fish and cut them up, set a frying pan over the fire, poured in sesame oil, and waited until it hissed. Then she threw in the fish, and when one side was done, she turned them over. No sooner had she flipped them when the kitchen was split open, and a girl came out. A lovely shape and velvet cheeks, eyes darkened with kohl, a perfect face, and she wore a sleeveless dress of satin, fringed with flowers in the Egyptian style, medallion in her ears and bracelets on her arms. In her hand she held a supple cane, and she poked the cane into the pan and in good Arabic said, "Fishes, will you keep your promises?" At this sight, the cook went faint. When the girl repeated what she said, the fish lifted their heads out of the pan and in good Arabic said, "Yes, if you come back, we will too. Keep your word and we'll be true. If you don't, then that makes 2. Then the girl turned over the frying pan and disappeared the way she came, and the wall was sealed behind her. When the cook came to, she found the 4 fish charred to cinders and was sorry. Fearing what the king would do, she said, "He broke his spear on the first raid." As she blamed herself, the vizier appeared and said, "Where is the fish? We laid the table for the king and he is waiting." In tears, the cook recounted what had happened with the fish and what she saw. The vizier, astonished, said, "How strange," and sent a messenger after the fisherman, who came back before long. The vizier screamed in his face and threatened him and said, "Bring us at once 4 fish like those you brought us before." The fisherman went home and fetched his fishing gear and left the city. Climbing the mountain, reached the plain on the far side and found the lake. Then he cast his net. Then he pulled it up. He found inside 4 fish as he had done before, and then carried them to the vizier, who took them to the cook and said, "Fry them in front of me." The kitchen girl prepped the fish, placed the frying pan over the fire, and threw them in. When both sides were done, the wall split open, and the girl appeared in gorgeous clothes and necklaces and jewels and a cane in her hand. She poked it in the pan and in good Arabic said, "Fishes, will you keep your promises?" The fish lifted their heads and said, "Yes, yes, if you come back, we will too. Keep your word and we'll be true. If you don't, then that makes 2. When the fish had spoken, the girl overturned the frying pan and disappeared into the wall, which closed behind her. The vizier said, "I can no longer hide this from the king." He went to see the king and told him what had happened with the fish before his eyes. The king, amazed, said, "I would like to see it." He sent for the fisherman, who came back before long. The king said, "Bring me 4 more fish at once, and quick." 3 officers escorted him, and the fisherman returned after a while with 4 fish, red, white, and blue, and yellow. The king gave him 400 dirhams, which he gathered in his clothes and left. And the king said to the vizier, "Fry them before me." "I hear and obey," said the vizier. He called for the pan and stove and sat to clean the fish, poured in the oil and lit the fire, and placed the fish inside. When both sides were nearly done, the palace wall split open, frightening the king and his vizier, and there appeared a slave who was like a mountain or remnant of a tribe of Ad, tall as a reed and wide as a bench. In his hand was a green branch, and he said, "Fishes, will you keep your promises?" The fish lifted their heads and said, "Yes, yes, if you come back, we will too. Keep your word and we'll be true. If you don't, then that makes two." Then the slave overturned the pan in the palace the fish had turned to ashes, and disappeared into the wall, which closed behind him. "I cannot let this rest," said the king. "There must be some secret story to these fish." He summoned the fisherman and said to him, "Where do you catch these fish?" "My lord," he said, "I catch them in the lake between 4 hills behind the mountain." The king asked the vizier, "Do you know this lake?" "No," said the vizier. "For 60 years I have traveled, roamed, and hunted here, sometimes for a day or two, sometimes for a month or two, but never have I known there was a lake behind the mountain." Then the king said to the fisherman, "How far is this lake?" "King of the age," he said, "it is an hour away." The king, amazed, gave the order to the soldiers and rode out to his troops behind the fishermen, who muttered curses at the jinn. They left the city, met the mountain, rode over it, and came to a vast plain where they had never seen before in all their lives. There was a lake between 4 hills, in whose clear water they saw fish in all their colors, red and white and blue and yellow. The king stood there agape. He turned to his viziers and princes, lords and nobles, and said, "Have you seen this lake?" "Never," they said. "And none of you knew it was here?" They kissed the earth and swore. "This is a mystery," said the king, "and I will not return before I learn what lies behind this lake, its fish, and their 4 colors." He told his men to stop and pitch the tents. They waited until night. Then he summoned the vizier, who was wise and practiced in the trials of life, and they spoke out of sight of the troops. The king said, "Let me tell you what I plan to do. I will go myself to find the secret of the lake and fish, and tomorrow you shall sit outside my tent and tell the princes that the king is indisposed and has ordered you to not let anyone into his presence. You must tell no one of my plan or where I am, and you must wait 3 days." The vizier, unable to refuse, agreed. Then the king tightened his belt and slipped the royal sword, and inside climbed one of the hills and walked all night. When dawn had broken and the sun had risen and the day begun, he saw a dark shape in the distance and moved toward it, happily, thinking, "Maybe someone there will tell me more." The king walked on until the shape became a palace of black stone plated with iron, built under a lucky star. Finding one door closed, one open, he was glad and gave a gentle knock and waited and heard nothing. So he knocked again, more strongly than before. But he could not hear or see a thing. He knocked a 3rd time and kept knocking, but heard nothing, and he thought, "It must be empty." Mustering his courage, he went in, and in the hallway shouted, "People of the palace, I am a stranger and a hungry traveler. Do you have food to spare? God will reward you." Then this the 2nd and 3rd time, and heard nothing. Then his heart was bolder now. He moved on from the hallway to the center of the palace, looked around, but could see not a soul. The palace was embellished with silk carpets, leather mats, and hanging drapes, and there were seats and cushions in a courtyard bordered by 4 arches, through which were sunken rooms that faced each other 2 by 2. In the center was a fountain where 4 lions of red gold spouted water from their mouths like gems and pearls, and all around were birds, singing as they crossed the palace under a high net to keep them from flying off. The king wondered, sad that there was no one there to tell him more. He sat in thought beside an alcove when he heard a plaintive voice and moaned these sad lines. "You never spare me time or stop. Pain here and danger there, and here between them is my heart. No mercy for a lover brought low by love's court, nor for the rich turned poor. I used to burn to be a breeze about you, but such judgment fell, no sight is left in me. What can the bowman taking aim do when the bowstring breaks? When cares descend in droves on a young heart, where can he go? Where can he go? At these wept lines, the king rose and followed a voice to a curtain over a door and lifted it to find a hall. At the far end was a boy who sat a 4 arms length above the floor, finely made, and young, moon face and silver tongue, dewy brow and downy jaw, rosy cheek, spiked with a freckle like a speck of amber, as the poet had it. Slip of a thing, whose hair and blaze are the world brightness and shade. No flaw his cheeks, round marks, anemone's black heart. The king, happy to see him, greeted the boy. He wore a silken tunic fringed with gold in the Egyptian style, and on his head a round Egyptian hat, and on his face the signs of grief and sorrow. He greeted the king with care and said, "My lord, dearer than anyone I ever rose to greet, forgive me for not rising." "You are forgiven," said the king. "I am your guest. Come with a serious matter. I want to know the reason for this lake, these fish of different colors, this palace where you sit alone, and for your tears." At these words, the boy's eyes streamed with tears down to his chest, and he recited, "Say to the one the days have shot with arrows, how many has life felled, how many raised? If you were sleeping, God's eye never shuts. For whom has time been fair? For whom the world unchanged?" He wept heavy tears, and the king, astonished, said, "Why do you cry?" "How could I not?" he said, "this being my condition." He lifted his hem, and the king saw that half of him from head to waist was made of human flesh. The other half from waist to toe was all black stone. The king was full of grief and sadness for the boy and said, "You have increased my cares by one. I sought to answer to the secret of the fish. Now I must ask their case and yours. Hurry, my boy, and tell me your story." "Lend me your ears," said the boy, "your eyes and mind." "My ears and eyes and mind are ready," said the king, and the boy spoke.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So lend me your ears, said the boy, your eyes and your mind. My ears and eyes and mind are ready, said the king. It's a great story. It's a long story. So this story is about the fisherman. There's one dead king and one enchanted king in the end. So the start of the story is what's interesting is the story of the ghoul. And the ghoul listens to the prince that has been betrayed. And this is all about keeping your word. The story is about keeping your word, keeping your faith, and being true to what you say. That betrayal has a price.
I thought it was more about suspicion and preemptively acting in a way that was unjustified.
Well, that too, that's always in the background because Shahrazad's making a point.
Mhm.
She wants the king to give his word to stop the killing. So she's introducing the idea of keeping your word as a king. So the king, the first king in the story with the wise Dubin ends up killing the wise Dubin, and the wise Dubin predicts his death. The fisherman is telling the jinn if he lets him out of the bottle, He was going to throw him into the deep sea. And the jinn said, I will keep my word. I will make you rich. So the fisherman agrees to that. The fisherman has 4 fish with 4 colors, which, as we go on in the story, these will have symbols. These are symbols of other things that we will reveal in the next story. The other part is the girl that kept appearing from the fish. She kept appearing and she kept burning the rest of the fish, so they could not consume the fish. The fish would be burned to char. She would flip it. So he takes him down to the lake to show him the lake. And he's amazed that there's a lake that exists that he's never seen. Something mysterious, mystical about what he sees. Not everything can be explained, but he wants an explanation. The king looked at the fish at the lake of many colors, took one in his hands and was amazed. He told his vizier to take them to cook. He had been given the emperor of Byzantine. The vizier went to cook and said, tears are for crying, as they say. The king was given these 4 fish. He wants you to fry them. Then he went back to the king, who told the vizier to give the fisherman 400 dirhams, and fisherman received the coins, held them in his clothes. Off he ran. As he ran, he stumbled and fell, stood again, thinking he was in a dream. For his family, he bought all they would need. So this story is about power and who has it and who doesn't, and how power corrupts, and the ability of power and what revenge is about. So the story is filled with revenge throughout. And Shahrazad is trying to get the point across. Revenge breeds more death. Spare me my life, I'll spare you yours. So the wise Dubin, whose head is cut off in the tray, who's pressed into the white powder. And the king starts to lick his finger and turn the pages of the book. In the pages, the poison lay for the king. And thus the king dies. And the wise Dubin tells him that he told him, a life for a life. God will not let you kill me. So what's interesting about the story is that it goes into multiple layers, where it's a story inside another story, and there's another story that comes out of the story and then leads to another story. And this is the genius of Shahrazad in keeping herself alive. Right? She's interwoven all these stories into a matrix, and she keeps taking the king down that road. And so you want to hear more. We want to hear more. We want to know more about what's going to happen in these stories. Where are these stories going to take us? What was your thinking, Lise?
Definitely that rabbit hole. Next door. Let's walk into this world, that world, this story, that conflict, this mystery. When you're reviewing the sequence, it was interesting that part of it was do not preemptively take revenge, so therefore you spare a life. and then your life will also be spared. The fisherman spared the jinns, but then the fisherman himself broke the oath and fished in that lake more than once. So we're going to see what happens to him later.
Yeah.
But that was, out of his obligation for obeying the king, or maybe his greed to get some more dirhams, or I don't know. That's yet to be seen on that. Going on to your idea of maybe power corrupts, his greed corrupted him. I'm not sure.
Well, on the part that you read, you never spare me time or stop. Pain here and danger there, and here between them is my heart. No mercy for a lover brought low by love's court, nor for the rich turned poor, that's the fisherman and the king, low by love's court, nor for the rich turned poor. I used to burn to be the breeze about you, but since judgment fell, no sight is left in me. What can the bowman taking aim to do when the bowstrings breaks? When cares descend in droves on a young heart, where can he go? Where can he go? It's fascinating. So you never spare me time or stop. So Shahrazad is asking that the king spare their lives, a life for a life, so his life would be spared. But she is creating this idea in his head by telling him these stories over and over again. She's creating the psychological reality that the king will start to live in as she continues to tell her stories. So psychologically, she's transforming him into somebody who can be reasonable. And so next week, we will pick up the story of the tale of the enchanted prince. What did you think of the story, Dr. Eric? Any thoughts?
Well, you two covered the core subject matter. I don't think I could improve on that. So I'll just throw out a general thing that hit me. And that is, we haven't changed much in all these hundreds of years since this was written. And almost every one of these stories, at least every other one, someone has talked into doing something because of greed, because of riches, because of I'll make you rich, I'll give you treasures, I'll give you the husband you want, I'll give you the wife that you want. I mean, we just haven't changed much. I was at the VA hospital yesterday and was talking to this Vietnam veteran sitting beside me, and we're kind of talking about things similar to this. And he said, I've learned that most people live in bubbles, and their bubbles are just about their world, their experiences, and nothing more, or very little more. And he said that's why you can sell people whatever new bag of tricks that comes along if you make them think that it's going to increase their bubble. And whether it's face cream, medication, church, God, all these different things that we see commercials filled with, it's just all about that. It's just appealing to our desire to want more and to improve everything about ourselves. And it just struck me that we haven't changed that much. The same tactics are used today.
Yeah, the illusion of immortality, that somehow if we gain more, we live forever. And that's not the case. Wow. Interesting. All right. Well, we're going to sign off as we usually do with the Institute for Conflict. I am not afraid. Dr. Eric,
I'm not afraid.
Dr. Lisa,
I am not afraid.
we are the Institute for Conflict, and we are not afraid. We are the Four Archetypes, and welcome back next week to the Four Archetypes podcast. We'll see you soon.